1 in 3 parents will be dealing with head lice. And if you're not yet dealing with head lice, you just might be the next one.
Welcome to Consultation Room Podcast.
Welcome back. Today we're diving into a topic that most people feel embarrassed talking about, but it's more common than you think. So whether you're a teacher, a parent, or someone who's been scratching their scalp a bit too much lately, we're here with all the information that you need. Now, 1 in 3 parents will actually deal with head lice. And if you aren't one, congratulations, you might be the next. Let's talk head lice. So, just as a start, what exactly is head lice?
Head lice are basically tiny insects that live on the scalp and they feed on human blood. So they're about like the size of a sesame seed, and they can be like white, brown, or grey. Their eggs are called nits, which are even smaller and stick firmly to the hair shafts. So there's one thing about head lice. Some people assume that it's due to like poor hygiene, like it's a sign of like poor hygiene. But having head lice is not a sign of like poor hygiene. Is in fact the lice actually prefer like clean hair. So basically it makes it easier for it to like cling to. So if you have clean hair, it's actually a good environment for head lice. So just because you have head lice does not mean that it's a sign of like poor hygiene. Yeah. So with head lice as well, it's usually spread through like head-to-head contact. So that's why it mostly affects like kids. And when your kids have it, it then leads to like most of the families getting it because, you know, it's spread through skin head-to-head contact, so hugging people. So it means that, like, let's say for instance, when your kids go to schools or sleepovers or camps, they're highly likely to catch it from their friends. Because kids are literally like the perfect host when it comes to head lice. They love kids because they're always like, you know, head to head, hugging each other, playing. So you find out that a lot of kids do have it. Less commonly, lice can spread via like shared hats or brushes or pillows, but it does not mean that that's not like the main route, but it still could happen. But that is basically what head lice is. They're basically tiny insects. So when it comes to symptoms, Trudy have mentioned a few, but do you mind telling us a few of like the symptoms to look out for if someone has head lice?
Okay. Now, when it comes to head lice, as I said, if you've been scratching a bit too much lately on your scalp, that might be a symptom of head lice. Not to mean that that is head lice, because if you've listened to our previous episodes, we have talked about something like dandruff, which could also have that, which could present as, you know, itchy scalp. So that is a symptom that could be associated with head lice. What you might also notice is you might notice the shells of the head lice, which is the nits. You might see them almost like white shells, almost like eggs. And you might notice those on your hair. That could be an indication that maybe you actually have head lice. Another thing that you might notice is maybe a rash on the lower on your upper back, so just below your hair there. So basically, it's more like with how they've been feeding and things like that, or maybe even you just scratching, you might cause that irritation. So that could actually could be an indication that maybe you have head lice. Also, sometimes if you feel that crawling sensation, it doesn't always mean that it is lice, but you might feel like something is crawling on your hair, on your head, like there's that sensation of like just something crawling. That could mean that it's head lice. Now, there's no other symptom as such, besides, of course, even an irritated scalp. As Steph mentioned, they feed on blood of your scalp. So you might notice a bit of irritation on your scalp. That could indicate that it is lice.
Yeah.
But the only sure way of actually knowing that you have lice is doing the comb detection. That's the
Yes.
only sure way that you will know that you have lice. But otherwise, you might have some of these symptoms. You might not even have some of these symptoms, where it's more like even signs. It's not quite symptoms, because you're not feeling bad. You're not feeling, you're not hot or cold or anything like that. It's just some signs that you might have head lice. But
Yeah.
as I said, this is not to be mistaken with dandruff, because dandruff also might present in a very similar way. The itchiness,
Yeah.
maybe even the flakes falling off your hair, your scalp, which is normally associated with the dandruff, might be confused for head lice. So the only sure way is to do that nit comb test. And then if you see what Steph said, which is tiny little sort of insects, normally they are 6-legged, and they are very, very tiny, teardrop shaped. And as you said, Steph, they can be either pale, they can be brown, they can be black. So just if you've done that test and put on a tissue, that's the only sure way of knowing that you have a sign
Yeah.
of head lice. I've mentioned something. I've mentioned the nit comb. So I suppose
Yes.
that is a way of getting rid of it, of
Yeah.
treatment. What is other treatments there is when it comes to head lice then?
Yeah. I'm so glad you mentioned like the nit comb. So that is usually called like the detection comb, which you can buy from like the
Yes.
pharmacy, so or even online. So if you suspect that
Yeah.
maybe you or your child have head lice, please do purchase that, because that's like a way
Yes.
of detecting whether you have head lice. So to get rid of head lice, what we normally do is we advise that you could do something called wet combing. So wet
Yes.
combing is basically it's just a way of removing like the lice and the nits.
Yeah.
So what we do, we advise you that you basically wash your hair with ordinary shampoo to begin with,
Yeah.
and just also apply loads and loads of conditioner to the hair, because these tiny insects, they do not like this environment when you do that. So make sure that you wash your hair with ordinary shampoo, apply loads and loads of conditioner, and then use the comb to basically comb through the hair. You use that detection comb that you can buy from the pharmacy. So you comb through the hair from basically the roots to the ends of the hair, and it might take a while. It usually takes about, I would say, about 10 minutes, depending on like the type of hair you have. We usually say 10 minutes if it's like a short hair, and it might take a bit longer if your hair, like if your hair is longer or even frizzy or curly. It might
Yeah.
take maybe up to like 30 minutes. So just comb through from like the roots to the end. And then when you finish combing through, make sure you rinse it off and then do it again for the second time. Like wash it thoroughly
Yes.
for the second time. So you do this wet combing on day one of like obviously finding the head lice, and then you
Yeah.
repeat it. So what with the wet combing, you have to repeat it several times. I think on day 1, day 5, day 9, and day 13. So you basically
Yeah.
do that to make sure it's just to ensure that you catch newly hatched head lice, because these
Yeah.
eggs, the nits are still in there. So you make sure you repeat it just to make sure that it's just to catch new head lice, and then you check again. Basically, check everyone's hair, yeah. If like everyone
Yes.
is infested, or even if they're not, check everyone's hair on day 17 for any free like lice in them. So please,
Yeah.
wet combing is one thing that I see as advising you. And
Yeah.
if wet combing does not work, there are some medicated lotions and sprays
Yes.
that you can also buy over the counter. So these actually like tackle the head lice, and what they do is that they kill the head lice, because the lotions and the spray, as I said, they contain some medicated ingredients, which
Yes.
varies. Some contains malathion, so many things, and they
Yeah.
tackle the head lice onwards. And you can buy these from pharmacies, from supermarkets, online. So just check if the work combing is not working, just check what you can use online or even come to the pharmacy. So
Yeah.
we normally say when you head lice should die within a day if you use these lotions and the sprays, but some lotions and sprays come with a comb to remove the dead lice and eggs.
Yeah.
So once you've noticed that, okay, yeah, there's no live head lice, just comb it through and then, just wash your hair as normal, as we said.
Yeah.
But however, some treatments may need to be repeated as well after a
Yeah.
week just to kill newly hatched lice. So
Mm-hmm.
check the pack that is okay for you to repeat. And also it's quite important when you buy these products, check that it's okay to use on your child, because there are
Mm-hmm.
some ingredients which are not suitable for children but they are suitable
Yeah.
for adults. So please make sure that you check that it's suitable for a child. Yeah.
Yes.
But apart, these are the main treatment I would actually go for. So basically just the wet combing and the
Yeah.
medicated lotions and sprays. But do you have any
Yeah.
other treatments that you normally advise your patients?
I actually do normally say either wet combing or dry
Yeah.
combing. So if you don't want to wet the child's hair, as we said, you might need to repeat this step twice, and you
Yeah.
might need to do this again. So if you don't want to wet the child's hair, you can actually do dry combing. So what I normally say to the parent is the same, procedures you've mentioned, Steph, when it comes to wet combing.
Yeah.
Do the same with sort of dry combing. Just make sure before you have used a nit comb, which
Yeah.
is a detection comb. Make sure you use a wide tooth comb. So not a brush, but a comb, because again, with a brush, they could go into the brushes and then you use them again and they'll get back on the hair. So just a comb, because you can easily sort
Yeah.
of wash it off after.
Yeah.
But what I normally say is advise patients is use a wide tooth comb and just sort of like comb through the hair. Make sure you detangle the hair. Make sure it's nice and straight, and then go in with a detection comb. And again, and I would normally say, just when it comes to dry combing, it's very important maybe to just divide it into sort of like different sort of parts. Say you just finish one part, and with that, I think you have to do it literally 3 to 4 times when it comes to dry combing, and that's why I think wet combing is a lot more effective, and that's why more pharmacists will probably advise wet combing. But if you don't want to wet the child's hair, you don't want to wet your hair, you can always go for dry combing. Again, you do this 3 to 4 times, in the same section before you move to another section.
Yeah.
And again, it's exactly the same procedure. You can do this sort of on day 1, day maybe 2 or 5, day 9 and day 12.
Yeah.
Now, I think it's also very important to mention that the reason we're going all the way to day 12 is because it takes the eggs 7 to 11 days to hatch, but it actually takes the head lice 9 to 12 days to mature to adults. So they could be little babies and maybe you might not quite get them. And by the time they've matured to adults in the 12th day, they're big enough for you to be able to sort of like comb through. So that's why it's very important to get all the way to sort of like day 12 and combing all through the few days. So I normally say to patients, to be fair, because they won't remember what day it is, so that I always just say every 3 days. Every 3 days, just comb through it. That's my, just rule of thumb. Like, yeah, just every 3 days, comb through it until the 12th day. And of course, if you notice that there's still a bit more itching and you notice some of the, maybe the white, as we said, the eggs, again, you can do this procedure again in a week's time. But yeah, dry combing is another thing I normally mention to patients. But no, otherwise, it would be exactly what you've said, which is if you've tried, say, the wet combing or the dry combing, and this has not helped, go and try maybe some of the lotions, sprays that we have in pharmacy. Hedrin is known by every parent. There's not a parent who doesn't know what Hedrin is. So, speak to a pharmacist and they will advise you on the best treatment, I suppose. But yeah, no, you've mentioned pretty much the treatment there is when it comes to head lice. But I also found out, this is I think from actually a parent. I was talking to a parent and I found out that there's something head lice doesn't like. So head lice doesn't like anything like tea tree.
Okay.
So if you use anything with tea tree, it's almost like when they're trying to sort of like, during that head contact, it's almost like they will be like, maybe not that head. But a parent told me that they don't like tea tree. And
Okay.
I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think they said they also don't like peppermint. So if you use like peppermint shampoos on your
Yeah.
child, that might be a thing. Listen, we're gonna get to the myths, but I'm just going by what parents have told me. I've
Yeah.
touched wood, never had any head lice. None of my
Mm.
nephews have had any. So I can't tell you anything I've tried
Yeah.
personally. But there's things that whenever we talk to patients, whenever we talk to parents, they always come back and say, okay, I actually
Yeah.
tried this and it really worked, or this is what I've been using, and my child has been lice free for like, I don't know, for years. So yeah.
I see. Yeah, I think when it comes to head lice,
Yeah.
I don't know, parents get so worried, and it's like,
Yes.
oh my God, sometimes they even want to take their kids out of school. But I think it's
School.
one thing, yeah, please do not take your kids out of school when you find out that they have head lice. It does not warrant you to
Yes.
take them out of school. But I think it's just like a thing. Once you find out that, oh my God, they've got head lice, you start to worry, Even when we
Yes.
were
Yes.
growing up as
It is.
well.
I mean, if you
Hmm.
think there's something crawling in your child's
Yeah,
hair, already that's a worry, because you think, oh my God,
yeah,
what if it gets in their ears? What if it, like, you think of the
exactly.
worst, and
Yeah,
they don't thrive on skin. They like the hair. So
yeah.
I'm not saying don't panic. I'm not saying don't worry. I mean, by all means, panic and
Yeah.
worry for you to be able to do something about hair, but don't panic and
Mm,
worry for you to take the child out of school.
yeah.
It's not, it's not
Mm,
that serious.
yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, you mentioned, I mean, we've mentioned a few of like the myths and the
Hmm.
misconceptions, and there is quite a
Yes.
few out there. I remember when we were in school, like in secondary school, it was,
Hmm.
you know how kids are. Oh my goodness, like they're so ruthless, yeah. So obviously there'll be
Yes.
like couple of like kids with maybe some head lice and nits in their
Yeah.
hair. And you know how mean kids can be. They'll be like, oh, you're so dirty. You've got head lice, you've got
Mm,
that. And
yeah.
oh gosh. And obviously, we were also scared, obviously, to once you hear that, oh, someone has got like head lice, you don't want to sit next to
Yeah.
them. You don't want to get
Don't want to
close to
do
them.
nothing to do with them.
Exactly.
You don't want them to pass you the pen or the
You know,
pencil.
like you just feel like you're gonna get it somehow, even by touching
That's
them.
it. That's
I mean,
it.
as I said, kids can be ruthless. It's just because, like, obviously we don't know, but we just assume that, it's dirty. So you don't want to touch
Yeah.
anything from like from that person. So that's something that I
Mm.
remember, like, in school that people used to do. But yeah,
Yeah.
let's go into like the myths and misconceptions of like head lice.
Yeah.
I think there was one myth actually growing up, which I heard that if you have head
Hmm.
lice, like because the lice is live or something, like people
Mm.
used to assume that like they carry like different diseases as well. So if you have head lice, you're probably
Mm.
gonna contract like some other disease and stuff. I don't know if you heard that, but yeah, that was something that I used to hear
Wow.
quite a lot. Yeah. So people didn't, that was one of the reasons why people did not want to like get close to others because they thought, oh,
Yeah.
lice carry other diseases and stuff. So, I'm probably gonna get some sort of disease,
Do you know
if I
what?
have head lice.
I see where they're
Yeah.
coming from, though. Because
Mm-hmm.
if you think about it, I mean, I'm not saying
Yeah.
this is true, because this is not really true. But I
Yeah.
could see why people would think that, because if you think about it,
Mm.
head lice is feeding on the blood on your scalp.
Mm.
Now that means that if it not jumps, because it doesn't really jump, that's another myth.
That's another myth. Yep.
But that's another myth. But if it moves from
Yeah.
your head to say someone else's head, and it's
Yeah.
been, feeding on your blood, and it's
Mm.
feeding on their blood, I mean, surely it's the same mouth. So whatever it was feeding on here, it might, do you know what I mean? So I could see why people might think that, but that's a
Yeah.
myth. And
Yeah.
again, as I said, jumping, flying,
Jump it.
swimming,
That's a myth.
no,
That's a myth. I mean, we
yes.
used to say that a lot. Yeah. Oh, yeah. The headlights is gonna jump from your head to my
Jump on
head.
me.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, that was
Yeah.
one other myth as well. Yeah.
Mhm.
Is there any other myth that you've come across?
I think we have debunked the most common one, which is that it thrives on a dirty scalp or on,
Yeah,
like it basically loves dirty hair,
that's
which is
right.
not necessarily the case. Head lice does not pick dirty hair,
Mm.
clean hair. Head lice will come for you. Okay. So that is one of the myths I think
Yeah,
people, say all the time, but that's not true.
yeah.
I think the only other thing I've heard is head lice only affects children.
Mm.
So people believe that only kids, only kids get head lice. Now, unfortunately, it affects mostly kids, but it's not only kids.
Yeah.
And the reason I'd say it affects mostly kids is because so head lice actually loves any sort of like high sugar level blood. So kids love sugar, they love sweets and all of that.
Yeah.
So head lice is likely to prefer that environment, not necessarily to go just for the kids, but to prefer that environment as opposed to maybe adults. That's why most kids will have head lice and not adults.
Yeah.
Another thing when it comes to that whole head lice only affects children is head lice only affects children and not adults. It can actually affect more women than men. For the simple reason, again, that women actually have a high sugar level in their blood than men, just naturally. So again, it will prefer us over men. And one thing head lice doesn't like is high testosterone. Men have more testosterone.
I see.
So any high testosterone blood, they're like,
yeah.
we don't like this. So they won't really enjoy that environment.
Yeah.
So they will prefer women over men and then children over adults. So that whole idea that it only likes children is a myth. If your child has head lice, you can get head lice.
Yeah, that's
Again,
right.
just because it prefers low testosterone blood levels doesn't mean that men won't get it. Men can also get head lice. So if your children and your wife has it, you could also have it. Simple as say. It's not, it doesn't pick and choose. Head lice will affect, or infect anyone.
Yeah.
So that is, I think, the only other myth I've heard.
Yeah. I mean, there are also two more myths that I wanted to say. I'm not sure if you've heard this one, but sometimes some people also say that maybe their pet gave their child the head lice. I don't know if you've heard that. Yes. I've heard it. They were like, oh, my dog, like, Sparkle gave my child like head lice or something. But no. This is only a myth. Like, as we said, head lice, they actually like human the best. You can't get head lice from like your pets, like your cats, dogs. No, you can't. They actually like humans the best. Yeah. So that's one myth. The other myth is when you were talking about like, the other remedies such as like the peppermint oil and the tea tree oil, I actually thought of one as well, one myth. I don't know if you've heard it, but people used to say, if you have head lice, you can basically smear your hair with like mayonnaise or like olive oil, and then that can like get rid of like the head lice, basically suffocate the head
Oh, I've
lice. I
definitely
don't
not
know
heard that.
if you heard
No.
that. Oh, okay.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, but again, that's a myth. We've already told you like the things you can use for head lice. Okay, so basically the wet combing, get your OTC products, and as Trudy mentioned, the peppermint oil or tea tree oil are best. But mayonnaise and olive oil, I've not heard that can be good for head lice. Yes.
So yeah, you saying that has actually reminded me something that I've heard in pharmacy as well. A woman came in and she had tried the same treatment on her child, the neat comb and all of that. And as we said, it's not a very easy, 2-minute job.
Yeah.
So she had to do that on herself because her scalp was a bit itchy and she was not sure. But what she said is, if I dye my hair, is the head lice going to die? If you know what I mean, like, because she thought that the chemicals in the hair dye would actually kill the head lice. That is not the case, okay? Your hair dye treatments, your, I don't know, perms and all of that is not necessarily going to kill the head lice. It doesn't die by just sort of like your regular chemicals. No, it needs this treatment, so the permethrin, the dimethicone, these are the treatments that will kill your head lice and not your hair dye. If anything, what could happen is you could actually end up dyeing the head lice the color you're dyeing your hair. So if you're dyeing your hair pink, your head lice might be pink. If you're dyeing your hair black, it might just blend nicely with your hair. So no, that is definitely me.
Make
your
sure
dyes
you treat it
and
before
your colors
dyeing, you know.
Exactly. So that is one of the other myths that I've heard in pharmacy.
Oh,
so just follow the treatment as I said. The sprays, the lotions, this is what's going to kill your head lice, not your hair dye.
Oh, brilliant.
You did mention something briefly, and I think maybe I should just add a little bit on when it comes to that, which is you said when it comes to some treatments, it might not necessarily be suitable for your child. So you have to check and see what is suitable for your child, because some treatments are suitable for adults and not for children. So it's very, very important to know some of the groups that maybe would not be suitable to get treatment over the counter in pharmacy. So normally we advise if you're breastfeeding and pregnant, it might not be suitable for you to just buy the lotions or the sprays over the counter. Speak to your doctors. You might get, some, and also I always say sometimes, especially if you're breastfeeding and pregnant, the easy way is to have almost like something to fall back on, if you know what I mean. So if you go to doctors and give a prescription, they know you're on this treatment. So if anything, they know that, because sometimes if something happens, you won't even remember what it is you're using on your hair. You won't remember some of these things. So it's very important when when they say you're pregnant and breastfeeding, not to just buy any treatment over the counter. Speak to someone about it. Not necessarily your doctor. Speak to the pharmacist. Let's be honest. We will have ways that you can use to sort of treat and get rid of the head lice. Also, if a child is under 2, some of the treatment that is suitable for children might not be suitable for that child. So I think that is very, very important. Those are normally 2 groups that are always 3 groups really. That are always I'm always very keen. So if a mom is coming into pharmacy and she wants to buy something for their child, I always ask, are you breastfeeding? Could you be pregnant? And for the child, is the child under 2? These are the 3 questions I always ask. So it's very, very important that before buying these products, speak to a pharmacist, give them all this information, and they'll be able to advise you on the best way to go forward. Is there any other group, Steph, that you've come across that you would advise any differently?
No, these are the only groups, like basically pregnant women, breastfeeding, and kids. And as you mentioned, these products over the counter are not suitable for them. So please, if you do find out that these, and like you are in this group and you have head lice, just speak to the pharmacist. Pharmacist will probably direct you to your GP, because the GP would then prescribe you with will give you a prescription for a medication that you can use. But please do not go and get an OTC product, because as we know, head lice is treatable, so we know the products to use and stuff. But please don't just pick anything for them. Make sure you speak to a healthcare professional before you go ahead and treat it.
Okay, well, I suppose we've spoken about pretty much everything there is to talk about head lice. I mean, there's always going to be things that we can advise. What I normally say is speak to your pharmacist, especially if you're a new parent and this is your first encounter with head lice and you don't know what to do. You're not sure. You spoke to some parents and they just said to you, go to the pharmacy and get the comb, or go to the pharmacy and get the lotion. Just don't just come in and just buy a comb and a lotion that says head lice treatment. Speak to a pharmacist.
That's right.
Let them give you guidance. I think that's very important. So what is your take home when it comes to head lice, Steph?
Okay, so for me, when it comes to today's episode, the key things to remember is that head lice are common, harmless, and treatable. So please, if you're a mum and you find out that your child has head lice, don't panic. Don't take them out of school. Just speak to a pharmacist and get the right treatment. Do not panic. It's good to panic, but please do not panic because we can't treat it. As we've mentioned, they spread through head-to-head contact. It does not mean that you're dirty. So please, let's debunk that myth. So speak to your pharmacist, as they are the best and literally the first contact of people that will give you the best advice, because OTC treatments are available, which we've already
Yeah.
mentioned, such as shampoos that contains like, and lotions and sprays that contains dimeticon and so many other medications. And basically regular combing and wet combing, as we mentioned, are effective ways in like getting rid of the head lice. So
Yes.
please keep calm. It is a hustle, but it's not a health crisis if you find out that you've got a head lice or your child has a head lice. So please keep calm and just follow the instructions and get rid of the head lice. And most
Yeah.
importantly, make sure you check, you treat, and communicate with like close contacts, like your family members, anyone that is in contact with anyone that has head lice, especially even
Yeah.
in schools as well, or in your households, or I don't know, people, if your child goes for a sleepover, anywhere, please just
Mm.
communicate with them so that at least you could all treat it and get rid of the head lice. But what is your
Yes.
take-home message, Trudy?
I think you've put it really, really well. But what I'd like to just say is it is a common problem. Okay. As I said, 1 in 3 parents will be dealing with head lice. And if you're not yet dealing with head lice, you just might be the next one. So it is very, very common, especially in children between the age of 4 and 11. This is very, very common. So you're not alone. If you're a parent who has a child who is dealing with head lice, you are not alone. Or if you're an adult who's dealing with head lice, you're a teacher who's dealing with head lice, you're not alone, because as we said, adults too can get head lice. You know, it's not something that just picks on the children or on the kids and then just sort of like, you know, passes over adults. It doesn't work that way. Okay. So that is very, very important to note. As you said, Steph, it's not something that parents need to panic about. It's not something they need to stress about. I mean, it's good enough for you to do something quick. So as we said, with the right sort of like detection, with early detection, you will be able to get rid of most of the head lice and the nits and any sort of like unhatched eggs quick enough. But it's not basically something that, you know, is harmful. You know, they are harmless. You know, they can live in hair for a very long time. The worst that could happen is you'll just be very itchy, and it can be frustrating as well with that sort of like itchiness. But it's not, you know, it's not a crisis. Okay. Head lice is not supposed to be, you know, as you said, Steph, enough for you to take your child from school.
Yeah.
Okay. Let the child still go to school. Just have the right tools.
That's right.
Speak to your pharmacist. It's very, very important to speak to a professional when it comes to some of these things, especially if you're a first-time parent or if you're a first-time, I suppose, host of head lice. So speak to your pharmacist. You don't need to go to the GP. I can't emphasize that enough, because the number of times I see a prescription that comes into pharmacy and I'm thinking, you really did not need to go to the GP. We could have helped you in the pharmacy quick and easy. So don't go to, you know, you don't have to go to your GPs unless, of course, we said if you're pregnant, if you're breastfeeding, your child is under 2, by all means, you know, go to the GPs. But if your 7-year-old child is, you know, you've noticed that they have head lice, come speak to us. We are your first point of contact. Like, we will be the first people to help, and we'll give you the best advice. It's very, very important to treat the hair once you've noticed that there is a head lice. So detection and also treatment is very important. If you've noticed that the detection hasn't quite, or you've detected them and you've been combing through the hair and that's not really cleared the head lice, treatment is very, very important. And we will always give you safe and effective ways that you can do this. But as we said, you are not alone. And we hope that this episode has been educational. So please send it to a new mom, send it to a mom who's just taken her 4 or 5-year-old to school, preschool. Send it to someone who has been itching a little bit too much in the office. Let's share this episode, like, subscribe, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for tuning in today. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Remember, a healthy chat is a step towards a healthy life.
If you have any topics you'd like us to discuss, drop us an email at consultationroompod@gmail.com. Our Instagram is @consultationroompod. See you next week. Stay safe, stay healthy, and stay blessed.